is Bryan Jenks. On this channel, I usually talk a lot about Obsidian, software and programming, research stuff, things like that. I did make a comprehensive video about what it's like to live and have ADHD as somebody who is clinically diagnosed with ADHD. And I got a lot of positive response and feedback from that video, and a lot of people who seem to have that disorder or relate a lot of the symptoms with that, with the way I approach things in Obsidian or using Obsidian, the note-taking app Obsidian, with ADHD. There seems to be a lot of people with it who also use that application, which is funny to me. And there's a large amount of people that do just have this disorder. It's a very common disorder to have. And I just want to talk a little bit today about what it's been like for me to be back on medication for a few months after not being on it for almost 10 years. So if this sounds like an interesting video, stay tuned. I'm going to have timestamps for everything, and hopefully you'll find some of this interesting. I also have learned several new things about having and living with ADHD, as well as like coping with it and working with and around it. So I'll add a couple of those things in, along with just like what it's been like to be on medication, what medication I'm currently taking, what my ramp up program was for my dosages, and all the stuff around ADHD medication. So if that sounds interesting, stay tuned. And if not, I'll have more Obsidian content coming up usually every week. So thanks for stopping by, and let's get into it. So I was diagnosed with ADHD at around the age of 16. And I went and saw a psychologist. I was in therapy for some other related symptoms stemming from this disorder. So I actually received a clinical diagnosis at age 16. And by the time they actually got me to get my diagnosis, I was already almost an adult. And by at that time, my parents already thought I had it, and they left it up to me at that point to decide, okay, yeah, we're going to take you in. You got your diagnosis finally. You're old enough to make this decision. Do you want to try medication? And when I was in high school, I decided, yeah, let's try this. Let's see if it helps anything. And for a while it did. In the beginning, while the medication, because it's a neurological stimulant, it was affecting my brain, and all I remember from certain points of time back then was I basically was like a zombie for a month, and like I didn't do anything but like eat, sleep, homework, and I was very like flatline emotionally. So I was just like a robot zombie for like a month, and I'm going to attribute that to maybe like the medication balancing out my system. Maybe I started on too high of a dose for my age, weight, size at that time. I don't know. So that was kind of off-putting when thinking about going back on. But the reason why I went off of my medication in high school to begin with was because I was trying to join the Marine Corps. And when you wanted to do that and you've been on a neurological stimulant for ADHD, you have to, this is at least what the staff sergeant told me, you have to be off of the medication for as long as you have been on it, which means I had to wait 2 years before even beginning the process to attempt to join. That's without even talking about passing MEPS and with a clinical diagnosis on my record at that point, in my medical chart. And by that point, I'd already grown out of the desire to join the armed services, but that's why I stopped. But as for what I was on and what I am on again, I'm on the exact same regimen. I take 2 different kinds of medication. I have a long-release Concerta, which is, I believe they're both classified as just methylphenidate as the actual medication name, but Concerta is what I take, and I'm on the highest dosage you can get, which is the 54 milligrams. And these medications are really difficult to get without like, well, I'm just gonna leave it at that. They're difficult to get because they are a highly controlled substance, because they're a stimulant. So when you hear like all the tropes about college students taking Adderall for academic purposes and so they don't have to sleep, like that's the type of stuff that we take just to be more functional and quote unquote normal, even though there is no such thing as normal, but to be more or less drastically impacted by the disorder. This is the type of things that we take. Stuff that makes you go zoom makes us go So I take Concerta, which is my long acting release medication. So I take that in the morning, get ready for work, take a glass of water, just shoot a pill back, And that's what I take for my entire like working day or a day that I need to be busy or productive. And what that does is that it slowly releases that stimulant over the course of an 8-hour day. It's a very long acting release. But the current modern day schedule, the way that we do things, we go to work, we come home. Well, I also have school, I have businesses, I have this channel, and I need to do things after work. So I need to have more help after my normal work day. And also when I was a kid, I was also in school and I had homework. So more things occur after just the main portion of the day. So that's why I also have Ritalin. Now, Ritalin's probably the one that's gotten the most publicity, Ritalin and Adderall. But the Ritalin I have is like it's a fast-acting, immediate burst of energy for a couple hours. This is what I take when I just need an additional boost when I get home to focus on tasks like homework or school and my businesses or what have you. And this is what I take to just get that quick burst, but then I also want it to wear off in time so that I can actually sleep that night. And one interesting thing I've noticed about these medications is that being on them, especially in the beginning, I actually slept more and better. I actually had an easier time falling asleep at a reasonable hour. Normally, I'm up all hours of the night, sometimes 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'll wake up at 5 and 6 or 7, whatever. But having these medications early on, I noticed that I was going to bed at a reasonable time, like 11 o'clock, maybe even earlier, and getting more restful sleep, which is usually rare for me. Usually I sleep maybe around 5 or 6 hours a night, which is why I get so much done, because I'm always doing stuff and not sleeping. So that's actually what I'm taking. I'm taking Ritalin and Concerta, and I started noting a daily log. When I first started taking these medications, I kept track every day of my symptoms, pro, con, how I felt, how I noticed things changing in myself, and reported that back to the psychiatrist who prescribed me my medication as we started ramping up my dosages, because I'm a big guy. I'm 6'6" or 198 centimeters, and I'm like 250 pounds. I'm a big guy, so depending on how strong of a dosage I need to help me, we needed to ramp up my dosages in a way that was beneficial and not harmful. So we actually had a scheduled plan where I would start taking my Concerta first, and this was only in the beginning, only Concerta. And I was taking like 14 milligrams. I would take one pill per day, and then for the next 3 days, it would be the same dose. And then after 3 days, I would then double that to like 28 or whatever the double dosage was. And I basically doubled and doubled until I reached the threshold of 54, which is the max dosage you're supposed to take. And then after I finished all those pills, they would then give me a single pill at the 54 milligram concentration. And that's currently what I'm taking now. And then after that started, after I started getting a tolerance to that, and I needed to have that additional focus and boost carry on later past my normal workday hours, that's when we started working on Ritalin. And there wasn't like a dosage ramp up with this one. It is the pill, and it's just a 10 milligram tablet of, again, the same thing, methylphenidate, but it's not slow acting. It's quick and immediate. And we just started, these are like all as needed. Now, one thing that's happened in recent weeks and month or so is if I take this with lots of caffeine, or if I take it every single day, obviously you will build up a tolerance. And so sometimes I have to go off of the medication just so I can like reduce my tolerance to it, which sucks, because one thing that these medications are extremely helpful for me with is my emotional regulation. It's not in the official like medical terminology book, I don't think, the DSM or whatever. Rejection sensitivity disorder, RSD, is incredibly frustrating to deal with. I'm easily emotionally triggered in a way that like things hurt my feelings very easily, and then I will get stuck on those and hyperfocus on that and just be in like a pit of hurt feelings, and it will literally train wreck an entire day. Like if something happens at 8 o'clock in the morning, I am wrecked for the day with RSD if I'm not like taking medication for something. And with medication, it's been really helpful to help regulate these feelings. And if I have an argument or get in trouble or something or whatever, it's less likely to just ruin my entire day, and I'm more able to cope with that, move on, and process emotions like a functional adult or a neurotypical adult. And it's one of the things that really sucks, that when I have to reduce my tolerance to the medication and go off of it, then I have to deal with the repercussions of not having that assistance with my emotional regulation that I've really come to appreciate while being on the medication. So I'm going to list out a lot of the changes in like a more bullet point format of what I noticed by being on the medication, as well as some new things I've noticed and learned about ADHD over time by either reading research papers, paying attention to my own behavior, and just some notes I've taken on it in like Obsidian. So I'm going to make 2 more sections for this: changes and the new stuff. So hopefully this will be a little bit more structured and consistent than my prior ADHD video, but we'll see. So hopefully you find all this interesting. So for changes, I have consolidated and distilled down the key points from my daily log on what I noticed about myself when I took these medications. Now, your mileage may vary. Different medications have different effects for different people. So this is just what I noticed for me on what I was taking and for how I personally felt. So I noticed personally that I had better grip on my impulsivity. So I'm really horrible with my food choices. I tend to really overload on sweets, and I will eat to excess, and it's just really bad. Bad portion size, bad impulse control, will eat lots of junk food and sweets. And I noticed that my behavior when it comes to impulsive purchases of food in the grocery store, and even like the whole point of, don't go on an empty stomach, even then, sometimes I would still impulsively purchase when I shouldn't. I noticed that got a little better when I was on this. And also, I noticed that I had a little bit more willpower and ability to kind of like curb my impulse in the middle of it. Like mid-impulse, I can sometimes say, no, I'm not going to do that. And that's like, no, that usually never happens. I'm usually never able to like hit the brakes in the middle of just making one of those impulsive decisions. Usually I would just have to write it out. And so I noticed that I actually had a little bit more stopping power in the middle of some of those instances. And that was really, really interesting. Another big facet of ADHD is the executive dysfunction and the ability to regulate yourself and your behavior. And when it comes to executive function, some of the changes that I noticed is that I was able to better separate from activities that were holding my focus. Like sometimes if I'm in the middle of completing a task, I don't want to context switch and then go to another task. And if it's even suggested, like if somebody comes and asks me to do something else while I'm in the middle of doing what I'm currently doing, it's almost like it makes me angry because I have to deal with that context switching, and I'm focused on this task, and it's almost painful to have to switch. And so I noticed that got a lot easier and manageable, more manageable to deal with. And so I was able to more easily let go of something I'm working on and then transition to another task, topic, idea, and able to separate from that hyperfocus a little bit easier. And also able to focus on tasks long enough to actually complete them and get them done. Like I described that the starting energy for tasks, and I actually got a question about this recently, is that the starting energy for a task sometimes can be insurmountable, where you have like a task that is just a really big project or thing you want to do, and it just looks like you have to jump over this mountain. And it's just like, I can't do that. It's just, I'm going to do something else. So the advice I gave for that person was like, break down that task into as many smaller pieces as possible, atomize it, and then snowball, where you take the least intensive task, smallest to greatest, list out all the tasks, start from the smallest, complete the tasks going down, and as you complete more tasks, you'll gain more momentum and it becomes easier to roll into the next task, snowball, and that actually helps you keep the momentum and energy going to tackle larger, more intensive tasks, because the starting energy isn't starting from zero. You're already snowballing. There's momentum. And so that initial starting energy barrier to beginning larger tasks, let's say you can't break it down, sometimes it's just a large task that needs to be done. I noticed that dealing with that got a lot easier. And that sometimes I was just able to more easily just do the thing. Just do the thing. And normally that's like what people will just say to somebody who has ADHD is just we'll just go do it. Sometimes that doesn't work, but I noticed it got a little better on medication. I'm also less distracted by notifications, my phone, or things while driving. And I've talked about this in the other video about how it's not about like I'm distracted, it's that I need more stimulation. Something is not stimulating enough for my brain, and it's like holding a bunch of cats in a cage. They're just like running around, just we gotta get out, we gotta do something. I need the feed. I need things, I need stimulation. And so the problem is driving by itself is not very stimulating. I need to be having like a conversation, I need to be listening to music, even that's sometimes not enough. And so sometimes you look at your phone, bad, dangerous, illegal. So don't do that. And so I noticed that on medication, it drastically improved that. Like I can just not look at my phone or even touch my phone at all for the entire 70-mile round trip or whatever, and just not be bothered. And that is such a godsend, because I shouldn't and can't afford to be doing that. And it's tough, because when it comes to driving, if I'm driving on a long straight road and I don't have any sort of assistance and there's no stimulation on long straights while driving, I will fall asleep at the wheel, and it's dangerous. It doesn't even matter if it's nighttime. It'll be broad daylight, and I will get sleepy. I will start to nod off. And when I've had to have long work trips where I was driving to the other side of the state and driving to like the California-Oregon border from the middle of California, like it's like a 9-hour trip, and several times I would almost fall asleep at the wheel. So it's definitely something that helps with that, and that's definitely something that could save your life. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the dealing with RSD, or rejection sensitive disorder, or dysphoria, is greatly improved. And when I'm on the medication, I'm better able to regulate my emotional responses, how I handle, deal, process, and express emotion, which without it is incredibly volatile, and it just sucks. It really sucks. It's one of the things that has probably had the biggest negative impact on my life. It's just my inability to process and not get sucked up into negative spiraling emotions or emotional responses. Like if I get into an argument with a significant other, and then my whole day will just be wrecked. I'll just be feeling these intense negative emotions, and it will just train wreck my whole day. And with the assistance of medication, being able to just process, separate the emotion from the reaction, and just process those things and reflect on it, and then get over it, and then let that go for the rest of the day, like, invaluable. It's one of the things why I like to take the medication every single day, and that it sucks when I actually have to stop to reduce my tolerance to it, because the benefits I get for my RSD with this medication is one of the best outcomes of taking the medication itself. That, and this ability to regulate my executive function, is totally worth it. And then finally, I did mention that my sleep schedule actually got better. That was more of like an early on thing. I am just in general a night owl, and I think that's actually something that's pretty common with ADHD people that I've seen around in a couple places, about how we have like this delayed circadian rhythm, so that we like to wake up later but stay up into the wee hours of the night. I am definitely that type. I fit that mold like a T, so I really like to stay up. But when I first started taking the medication, I also did notice that it was really easy for me to actually better just go to sleep at a normal time and wake up and feel refreshed. So that was nice, but I think it's half like habit that I just don't go to bed at a decent time, and half the ADHD. So yeah. All right, so for new things I've learned about ADHD, the disorder, and some of the effects of having it, either on behavior, how our brains work, some really new, interesting insights. Now, I'm not sure of like the source of where I heard this, or like which specific papers or research papers or something that covered this, but apparently, and if any of you have conflicting information that is like an academic source in a citation, please let me know. Apparently ADHD people have tics, like Tourette's syndrome. And what people typically associate with Tourette's syndrome, and I'm just going to throw it out there, I really love the streamer Sweet Anita. Sweet Anita, she's an awesome streamer and really wholesome, but she also shows, just by putting out digital content, that this is what Tourette's syndrome looks like. And now she has a type of Tourette's syndrome called coprolalia, I think it is, whereas what people typically associate Tourette's syndrome with, which is where you have like the verbal tics and physical like tics, where you do like obscene gestures and say obscene things that are completely involuntary and not under your control. So that's like the extreme example, but there are other like less pronounced forms of that disorder, Tourette's and ADHD. And I've seen some papers talking about the combination of people who have both Tourette's and ADHD. I, to my knowledge, do not have Tourette's. But what I did find interesting, going back to the main point, is that people with ADHD can have tics like people with Tourette's syndrome. Now, that doesn't mean that it's like I'm going to be wandering around a mall in the public and shouting obscene words at people, but I'm not even sure if what I have even counts for this. So this is all just speculation and anecdotal and just throwing it out there. But I noticed that after seeing this point and like observing myself objectively, that I do have like sometimes minor face twitches where I'll like my eye will twitch like this or something, like, and it doesn't happen often, but I do notice when it does happen. I'm not sure if that's it. I do involuntarily and often without even noticing just crack my joints all the time. I don't even know I'm doing it most of the time. And I've actually gotten in trouble like at work meetings before because at the time, my boss, who ironically also had ADHD, was irritated by my joint popping until I told her, like, that's a symptom of my disorder that you also have, so no, you can't talk to me that way about that. I work for the government, you do too, so this isn't a conversation we can be having. You can get in trouble, so stop. But in any case, yeah, incessant joint popping, unconscious nail biting to the point where I bite my nails until they bleed, like, because I'm just fixated in it. That really sucks too. Leg bouncing, my leg's bouncing right now. I took my medication today and my leg still bounces. So sometimes these behaviors don't go away when you take medication. Medication just helps improve the symptoms and it takes the edge off of a lot of things, but it's not like you're going to be magically neurotypical after taking a medication if you have the disorder. So like my leg is still bouncing, and then I fidget with things, like especially like it annoys my girlfriend to no end probably that I'm constantly fidgeting with my pop socket on my phone all the time, just incessantly. I'm always fidgeting with something. So those are things that I'm not sure if those count as tics, if it's just fidgeting or if it what, but I did find it interesting that ADHD people can have tics. And an interesting point and note that I actually took in my Obsidian Vault is about how ADHD people have issues with object permanence. Now, object permanence, the greatest example I have for this and that I love to use is when you play the game Peekaboo with a baby. Peekaboo. When you're hiding your face, the baby literally doesn't know that you exist anymore. Like you don't exist because you're hidden. They can't see you. But when you reveal your face, they're surprised because now you're suddenly in existence again. And that's a little bit overblown, but like the example is that object permanence is the ability to know that something, just because you can't see it, still exists. So what really blew my mind about this is that ADHD people have a severe issue with object permanence. What this actually results in is forgetfulness, misplacing things, inability to handle and maintain relationships. And so how this presents in me specifically is when ADHD people look disorganized, some of us might be, but what that might actually be is it looks disorganized to other people, but it's our disorganization in a way that I have everything spread out all over the place and it looks messy, but I know where everything is because I spread it out and it's all visible. And so the note I took on this was ADHD people prefer top-level structures. And what that means is that if I have a bunch of stuff I need to take with me to work, I'm not going to have everything in bags and bags and bags and all packed up into one single thing. I'm going to make sure I have everything I need before packing it up, and I'm going to spread it all out on a table so I can see everything I need. Collect everything, put it into one place, spread out, and now I can see it all. And because I can see it, I know it's there, I know it exists, and it's, I can handle that. But an example I use of the inverse is if I have vegetables in my crisper drawer in my fridge, it's in a drawer, it's hidden in a way, I can't easily see it. I forget those vegetables are in there, and then they go bad and rot because I don't see them. They're not constantly like, I can see it. I pass by this thing, I see it, it exists, I remember, oh yeah, I need to make something with that so it doesn't go bad. No, that it's incredibly bad. And so how this also manifests with relationships is that if you don't constantly see somebody regularly in daily life, and just there's no effort really to constantly maintain communication in that relationship, you forget to maintain those relationships about people. You appear as like a friend that just disappears and doesn't care, when the inverse is true. You care, but you just don't have that object permanence to think about, oh yeah, it's that person's birthday today, I need to go get them a gift and say hi and remember to communicate with some level of frequency. And so, as a quick aside, how I've actually dealt with that, because this is incredibly painful to deal with, because combined with RSD, when you forget to be a good friend by just talking to your friends, remembering to talk to them on a regular basis, then it appears, oh well, they think that you don't care and you're not there very friendly with them anymore, so they start distancing from you, and now you have one less friend, and that hurts, and now you can't regulate your emotions because you have RSD, and now everything sucks, and you're on a negative spiral, and then depression, and then so all these symptoms combined lead to incredibly adverse outcomes emotionally for people with ADHD. And the way I deal with this is I've gotten a couple influences and ideas from certain places, but one, I have a calendar where I just put every friend's birthday or important events on a separate calendar of just, this is the calendar for important events. So I know when everything occurs, and it's like Facebook reminding you for people's birthdays. But I don't like that, because then it also, when you do that, it only looks like, oh, the only reason I'm saying happy birthday is because Facebook told me and reminded me to. But when you have it on your calendar and you can see it coming a week ahead, I'm like, it's coming up. Buy the gift, have everything ready, do something extra, go above and beyond just the Facebook happy birthday. So like I handle that way. And then just remembering to actually talk to people. I love spaced repetition, the Anki software, and using flashcard systems. I have a specific deck that I have set up for a maximum timer interval of like 14 days, where I have it remind me to, hey, think about this person. What would you say to them right now? And then it has a convenient hyperlink to some sort of messaging software like a Facebook Messenger to directly message them. So I'm like, oh yeah, I do want to say something to them. Click, now I'm already talking to them. Reduce the friction between thought and action, but also the spaced reminders to actually reach out, be sociable, and talk to people. And that has been amazing, because I am horrible with object permanence and remembering just to talk to people. And it sucks, because then your friendship sort of dissolves, and emotionally that is so painful and it hurts. And there's not, like, it's because of your brain that you can't do anything about it, except try those strategies that I mentioned. And I've had some success with it, and it's been a lot nicer. And honestly, not that you should, my partner does pick up a lot of the slack for me and help me think also about, instead of being impulsive, thinking about how to be a better friend, how to be a better brother, partner. And it's been helpful, but you shouldn't also rely on other people externally for a lot of these things unless it's mutual. They are okay with that. They're okay with that extra burden upon them, but it's a burden you're placing upon somebody. So it definitely needs to be like a conversation, something that everyone agrees to, but maybe those are some strategies that can help. And then my last note was another one on rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and how it basically leads ADHD people to become people pleasers. Because with rejection sensitivity or rejection sensitive dysphoria, like whatever the acronym stands for, you basically do everything you can to avoid these negative emotions and the negative backlash because we can't regulate that. That comes with any sort of rejection or negative emotion. So we desperately flee from anything that's remotely negative. And so this manifested in me very apparently in my early 20s, especially when I started like actively dating as an adult, and then like, oh, something in the relationship goes wrong and I feel a negative emotion. I would just like up and leave the relationship like, nope, done. This is negative and I don't like it anymore. I'm not happy, bye. When no, that's not how you should approach your problems. You should talk about them and work on them and figure out the issue. And then maybe if there's like an irreconcilable difference that cannot be overcome, then maybe you might end the relationship and move on. But no, I would just drop that stuff like a hot potato. And that is not healthy and it's not okay. And it was unfair to my partners too at the time. So dealing with RSD is it's the most frustrating part probably for me. And when you have this, you want to be a people pleaser because you always want that positive dopamine hit. Oh, good job. You did a good job there. You know, pats on the head. You want approval. You want positive feelings and emotions, and the highs are good and the lows are horrible. So it leads people to only want to do things that would make other people happy and pleased with them. And that would lead maybe even to exploitation, where people just take advantage of the fact that you want and crave only that positive feedback and the negative is just soul crushing. And I also found something interesting about avoidant attachment, about how children and babies, and when their parents or caregivers are largely, I'm quoting here, are largely emotionally unavailable or unresponsive, babies and children have a deep inner need to be close to their caregivers, yet can quickly learn to stop and suppress their outward displays of emotion. And if children become aware that they'll be rejected from a parent or caregiver if they express themselves, they adapt. And so when their inner needs for connection and physical closeness are not met, children with avoidant attachment stop seeking closeness or expressing emotion. And this sort of resonated a little bit with me about how if you're raised without getting a lot of emotional feedback and closeness and intimacy and having a lot of that positive emotional impact in your life, and you have RSD, and because of that you're a people pleaser, and you know, what if I get this like rejection and you want to like curl into a ball and keep yourself safe and be like a turtle that never comes out of its shell, then you'll largely try to, like in this case, avoidant attachment, avoid displaying your emotions in fear of having some sort of negative backlash to that. And this manifested in me very, very easily and apparently, because I would always play off like, oh yeah, I don't care what anyone thinks, and I don't care. And I'd do my own thing, and people would say stuff, and I don't care, but I cared, and it hurt because RSD, and I don't have a filter for that. But you just like put up that front to try and, you know, not show your emotions, not put yourself out there, not make yourself vulnerable, because to be vulnerable is already a task in of itself, but to be vulnerable with the inability to regulate your processing of the negative feedback that you will receive in life at some point or another is just crushing. Yeah, I think I'll just end things there, but RSD is probably the most serious and worst part of ADHD for me, because it affects so many deep and pervasive aspects of life that are significant. You know, your partners, your family, your coworkers, like everything we do involves other people. We are social creatures, we are social animals. And so when a critical part and functioning part of society involves, you know, being able to process and deal with your emotions in a healthy and adult manner that you would expect from a neurotypical person, and you don't have that, and in fact it's not only your inability to do that, it's an extremely negative adverse reaction, it sucks. Because then some critical portion of your life is now adversely affected by your inability to handle any sort of negative emotion. Yeah. So that's like what I've noticed by being on medication, some new things I've learned about ADHD. I don't make too many videos on ADHD because this is not really like the focus I want to have for the channel, but some people really resonated and liked that video, and I get constant comments on it. So If you guys want some more of these, I'm not going to make this kind of content dominate my channel, but if you like this type of video, let me know, and I might make a few more on occasion. But this is just like updates from taking medication, things I've learned, changes I noticed from taking it, and hopefully you found the video interesting. So I'll catch you all in the next one.